everyone, I'm Hannah Cranston on special edition of TYT Interviews. I'm here with Courtney Demone today, who is a trans activist who is currently in transition and is testing the limits of loss of male privilege, censorship, and acceptance as she goes through this journey. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. So I read your article in Mashable as you kind of chronicled what your transition has looked like so far. Can you kind of tell me a little bit about that process?
Yeah, so in the Mashable article, we kind of focused on the loss of privilege throughout transition. I started transitioning almost a year ago is when I came out. And yeah, the Mashable article, we've talked about how starting a few months in, really started to notice the loss of privilege of living in the world where before things like walking at night or I don't know, just going to a bar were totally safe and like okay activities. Now that's something I have to think about and be nervous about, both from the stance of being trans, but also from the stance of being a woman. Walking down the street is a scary activity now, and it wasn't before. So I think my experience of having that happen through transition and having that change, a lot of people get used to living with the same amount of privilege throughout life. But being able to see that change has been very poignant for people, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what stood out to me most from the article in Mashable is you talked about sort of, you get to see the world in somebody else's shoes, quite literally, and you get to experience from a different point of view. Can you tell me, besides, you know, a bar and walking at life, where has been kind of the most you've seen that sort of loss of advantage?
Work has been different, talking to people on the phone, a lot more, people seem to be a lot more condescending, a lot more like wanting to explain stuff specifically. I've had a lot more people wanting to tell me how to do my own job. I'm a designer and I also do marketing. And so a lot of talking to various people and a lot of people just very ready to explain how to do my own job to me, which is, completely new and foreign. And I think it's foreign for men out there, and for women it's just something that happens and you learn to live with it.
Yeah, and one of the things, I want to pull out a quote that you mentioned in the article because I think this is really, hits the nail on the head here. You said, "My femininity, not my being transgender, that has brought about much of this privilege loss and it's misogyny that robs women of these privileges." So you think it's being a woman, not necessarily being a transgender, that's kind of exacerbating some of these changes that you're seeing?
Yeah. It's definitely about being a woman. I didn't start having these things happen when I came out as trans and as a trans woman. It happened once I started passing more. Once when I walked down the street in a skirt, guys across the street saw me as a woman, not as a trans person.
So it's been exacerbated as you become more feminine.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, that's super, super interesting. And one of the changes that is part of you becoming more feminine is coming through your hormone replacement therapy, obviously. Can you tell me how you've decided to kind of challenge some censorship policies on social media?
Yeah, so I've been taking topless photos.
You go, girl.
Throughout hormone therapy.
Yeah.
And
let's pull up one of them if we can.
So this was from the first photo shoot that we did back in September. So it was only 2 or 3 months into hormone therapy at that point. Not even yet, like 1.5, 2 months. So there's almost no breast development there. And been taking photos as breasts develop and seeing at what point Facebook and Instagram choose to censor those photos to kind of highlight the arbitrariness of the sexism, of the hypersexualization of women's bodies, specifically women's breasts and even more specifically nipples, which is a very weird delineation to make. But I think that makes it, it highlights for people how stupid these rules are, how my body barely changed, yet all of a sudden it's worthy of censorship.
Right.
And to highlight it even more, sadly the project didn't get to be seen through the way I wanted it to, of at one point they finally draw the line. Instead, Facebook and Instagram went back and just censored everything. So Instagram did it first, and then Facebook took a while.
And at what point was this at?
When
Did they start going back?
About a month ago, I think, maybe mid-December.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like 3 months into, okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't like they censored the images and everything onward. Initially, the images were flagged, and they were like reviewed, and this passes our community standards and all that. And then they went back a few months later, and usually they notify you whenever they do this. There was no notification. They just went back and changed their mind and censored everything.
And do you think any of that has to do with the fact that you had the article come out and maybe people were talking about it and things like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it might be directly related. The Guardian did a long-form piece about censorship in general, but highlighted on my story. They actually contacted Facebook. Yeah, it was pretty exciting. But they contacted Facebook and Instagram to ask them about their censorship policies. And that's when Facebook was like, yeah, we would... if she's a woman, then we would censor her topless photos no matter what. And then a couple weeks later, they went back and changed everything. So I think it was, they kind of made up that policy on the spot. And I think that policy, again, highlights just how silly it is. My body at that point hadn't changed at all. It was just my identifying as a woman that made my body worth sexualizing.
Right, so let's get a little bit more into that. I want to pull up a picture from your Facebook right now that kind of highlights how crazy this is. So explain to me what your experiment was here.
So I was trying to, first I put on some of my old clothes and no makeup and everything and posted a topless photo and then did makeup and clothing and everything and posted that on.
So there's an hour between?
It took me about an hour to get ready, yeah.
Wow, that is fast to get ready. You go, girl. And then what happened from here?
I was hoping to see if they would censor them differently. They didn't, actually. They censored both of them, which again was just, I think at that point, they saw what I was doing and they just didn't want to feed into it. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. So what does it mean for you to be as a woman, have your nipples censored and have your breasts censored?
This just highlights the ridiculous, arbitrary ways that sexism affects women. I chose this specific way to talk about these things because it's easy for people to understand. It already had some movement with the Free the Nipple campaign and everything. For me, the cause isn't specifically about censorship of women's bodies and sexualization. It's about sexism overall and being able to talk about my loss of privilege throughout transition and seeing sexism affect me throughout transition. That's kind of where the real project is to me, to be able to get people to understand that like sexism exists and like to be able to show how like the stark contrast and how I'm treated, I think really highlights that for people. The whole nipple thing was just the glitter to wrap the whole package in to get people in. So
you're not only fighting against the over-sexualization, sexism, and things like that. You're also kind of fighting against cultural appropriation as well. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So when I was 17, I got that tattoo on my chest. I don't know why somebody let me get a tattoo when I was 17, but they did. And I thought it was really cool. I was very much like hippie-ish back then. I had dreadlocks. It was, it was a weird time. And yeah, so I got that tattoo. It's, from my understanding of it at the time, it was a Maya symbol that represented their god Hunabku and was also somehow associated with the center of the galaxy, and that's why it had the swirlies and everything.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, that's really cool. And also just like, I think that's a very common thing for white people to do is we see since our culture is normalized, we see our culture as boring, and so we latch onto other cultures to try and make ourselves feel more exotic or cultured or whatever. There's so many problematic things with that way of thinking and that way of acting, as well as just like inappropriate to claim other cultures as your own, which I did. And so when my photos went viral, I had a number of Indigenous folks commenting about the appropriation of that symbol. And I was like, oh God, I just knew instantly that I had, can I swear?
Yeah, go for it, girl.
I knew instantly that I had fucked up.
Yeah. We encourage swearing at TYT.
Nice, awesome, into it. Yeah. So yeah, I knew I fucked up, and like it was just so frustrating because like I was totally aware of cultural appropriation. It was something that I talked about with my friends and everything, but I just never made that connection between the symbol that I had tattooed on my chest and cultural appropriation. So I ended up deciding to get the tattoo covered after a long talk with not only the people who were critiquing me on the web, but also friends who are Indigenous, not Indigenous to the areas that the symbol comes from. So I guess that's another point to highlight is the symbol actually is not Maya. It's a Mexica symbol, which is used on ritual cloaks. Apparently, this is from my understanding, the research that I've done, and I could be wrong, and I really apologize if I am getting this wrong to any Mexica or Maya people who are watching this. Yeah, and the god that the symbol was supposedly representing, Hunabku, is not actually a Maya deity at all, but rather the syncretic deity that Hunabku means only God, and it was the way that priests who came over were trying to get Christianity into Maya culture by inserting this new god into there. So the symbol itself became very indicative of all of this colonialization or colonialism and appropriation just over and over, layers and layers. I don't think I could have picked a worse symbol to get tattooed on my body.
But you came back and you tattooed over it, and that's how you chose to kind of repair that situation, right?
Yeah, after some conversations, wasn't sure if covering it would be a cop-out or what, but after talking with some people, we agreed to blur the symbol in the previous photos and cover it up. And that seems to have been a good way to go about things. I'm sure there will be people who critique that, and that's totally fair, and I deserve that criticism. Yeah, I think when white people try to decolonize, or support decolonization, it's always going to be problematic, and there's always going to be harm in it, but we just do the best that we can, and yeah.
Well, your new tattoo looks beautiful.
Thanks.
It's interesting as you kind of talked through that experience. I do see a few parallels in maybe how some people approach the transgender community. People, know about it and they want to be accepting of it and they want to understand it, but sometimes mistakes are made. Have you found, how do you feel like people sort of repair some of their mistakes, and how do you approach people who are making mistakes in maybe communicating about the issues that community faces?
I do these things called trans inclusion workshops. We go into service providers, be it hospitals or shelters, or we did a yoga studio once. My waxing salon wants to do it. And basically all we do is work with people to make sure that they're being inclusive of trans people. And the most common fear that comes up is I'm afraid to make mistakes. And we always have to highlight, this is a safe space to make mistakes. And I think that's really important, is mistakes are going to be made. I did with my tattoo, and moving forward with my tattoo, I'm going to probably make more mistakes. Yeah, mistakes are going to be made, and it sucks, and it hurts. When people misgender me or say something inappropriate, it hurts and it sucks, but everyone makes mistakes, and the important thing is that we learn from our mistakes. A lot of people will say something thinking they're being helpful, and then when they're critiqued, they will defend and be like, oh, I was just trying to help out, or oh, I was just trying to be supportive. The most important thing is if somebody criticizes your mistake, is to own it and be like, yeah, I made a mistake and I'm sorry, I'm going to work on that. And I might make that mistake again, but I'm doing the best I can. As long as, you're accepting the criticism, especially if you're in a place of privilege relative to the person that's criticizing you, and doing your best to improve that. And
what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people making to the community?
Trans community? Misgendering is a hard one.
Yeah.
I think that comes up a lot, and I think
So
people are
let's get
starting to
into
it.
to misgendering a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, so what does that look like? Is that mainly with pronouns, or can you explain that a little more in depth?
Yeah, it's mostly with pronouns. That's the most common thing that comes up.
And how should one approach somebody if they're not sure which pronouns?
They is often safe.
Okay.
But I mean, ideally, something that we do in a lot of trans work is when we introduce ourselves, we say, "Hi, my name's Courtney, and I use she, her pronouns." And that's not just in trans spaces. I'm a youth leader at a trans and queer youth drop-in center, and my coworker, the other leader there, is cis, and she is so much better at this pronoun stuff than I am. Every single time she introduces herself in any context, she's like, "Hi, my name's Michaela. I use she, her pronouns." I don't even do that, and I should probably start. But yeah, introducing that into your daily life of addressing your own pronouns or asking people of their pronouns, especially if you're unsure. It's a little uncomfortable for both sides if you're like, "I'm not sure what pronoun you use," but it's better than making an assumption and fucking up. Often, if you're not sure and it's not the place to be asking, they is usually safe because we use they as a gender-neutral singular pronoun all the time. A lot of people don't realize that it's part of their vocabulary, but if you're like, "I went to the doctor and they gave me a prescription," like, it's totally fine.
Right.
And if you do screw up on pronouns, it happens honestly, like, I have a lot of non-binary friends who use they as their proper pronouns, and I even fuck that up, and I feel really bad about it.
So non-binary means that they're gender neutral, just so we can clarify for everybody.
Yeah, so I'm a binary trans person. I identify within society kind of has this gender binary as there's only men and there's only women, which isn't totally true.
Right.
And though I'm trans, I do identify as a woman. There are tons of people who don't identify as man or woman, so they fall into that non-binary umbrella. So yeah, I have tons of non-binary friends. I screw up their pronouns far more frequently than I would like. And yeah, and the important thing is that you quickly correct yourself, a very small apology, and you move on. You don't want to make a big deal out of it. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," and because that just makes everyone feel awkward. It delays the whole conversation. It brings way too much attention onto that specific person. It's just like, "Sorry, they," and you keep moving.
And are questions okay?
Yeah, questions, if you approach them from the right place.
Okay,
if
get into that.
Yeah, so I think any person who is in, who has an identity which is somewhat exotified is bombarded by questions constantly.
Right.
A lot of which are inappropriate, and a lot of which you just get tired of answering whether or not they're appropriate or not.
So would you mind kind of distinguishing which questions are inappropriate? So, because I think a lot of people want to be allies, and I think they want to ask the right questions, and they want to understand, and I think sometimes people are scared to kind of delve into that. So what are inappropriate questions to ask? And then maybe you can shed some light on what appropriate questions you can ask.
The most common inappropriate questions are asking about the medical side of transition.
Yeah.
That comes up a lot. People asking about surgeries, about hormones, whatever.
So that includes like saying anything like pre-op, post-op.
Yeah, all of that stuff is very, like, that language just makes me feel gross. Yeah. Asking about genitals and stuff, even, yeah, like it happens all the time. People are like, "So what's going on down there?" It's
Which
like,
is
none of your
crazy
fucking business.
Because so I read an article that kind of touched on this, and like I don't ask about people's genitals on a daily basis. Like, what? I don't understand why that's even sort of socially accepted in that community, or to that community, I should say. It's just, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So don't ask about genitals, all right?
Yeah, generally, that's generally not a very good thing to ask. Yeah, and the rest is just like asking about past, or saying like, "Oh, you used to be a man," or "You used to be a woman," or something like that. Like, it's like not really important, and like it gets into weird, just people really otherizing you when you start doing that. You get that 100-foot stare sometimes when people realize you're trans, and suddenly like they're othering you, and it's just like they're a million miles away all of a sudden, and they're no longer talking to a person. They're talking to this foreign identity or whatever.
Yeah. When you talk about kind of saying you used to be a man. I know you posted something, I think it was on your Facebook about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of talking about how you don't like when people say like, oh, you were a hot guy and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind of get into that? Because I think even we're seeing that on a bigger scale with Caitlyn Jenner, how they're always saying, wow, she looks so amazingly hot for X,
Yeah.
Y, Z. And so talk to me about some of the problems with that and why that's a problem for you.
Can I wrap up on the previous question,
Yeah,
please?
sorry.
No worries.
Go for it.
Yeah, and then the other realm of questions that gets uncomfortable is people asking the real basic things over and over again, like you prefer she, her pronouns, or what's the difference between transgender and transsexual, and all of these things. Anything that Google can answer, you should probably ask Google.
Love that.
Yeah, because we get annoyed with those questions, and it's just draining, and we don't have time to be everybody's personal trans resource all the time. So anything, go to Google, learn as much as you can, and then if you're still confused and you come to us and be like, hey, I spent all day reading on whatever website and I still am a little confused about this, what's the right word to use or whatever. I'm super happy to answer those questions because I know you're trying.
Yeah.
When it's just like, I don't understand this and I'm going to put my understanding on your shoulders, that is frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Cool. So then kind of back to your Facebook post, can you expand upon that and why that's so problematic?
Yeah. So something that this is a bit of a personal thing, although I know a lot of trans people also face this, is obviously life as a cis person is way easier.
Can you clarify? Let's just clarify what cis actually means. Yeah.
So the prefix trans is Latin. It means across from. Cis means on the same side of. So when we use the word cisgender, it means somebody who is not trans, somebody who identifies with the sex and gender they were assigned at birth. And so, yeah, for living as the gender you were assigned at birth has a lot of benefits. Being trans is hard a lot of the time, and we transition because it hurts us to be in that gender. But there's always that doubt of, would life be easier if I just stayed the gender I was assigned? And that was a big thing for me throughout transition of specifically, I knew I was a very attractive, or I was seen as a very attractive guy. And so that was very hard for me of am I ever going to be desirable as a trans woman? And so when people would comment on my Facebook being like, wow, you were such a hot guy, it's well, one, I wasn't really a guy to begin with.
That's
Two,
a really great point. So expand upon that before you get into the next part.
Yeah, I was ever since I remember, I think a lot of people hear the man born in a woman's body or woman born in a man's body or whatever. And I think that's not, some people do feel that way. I definitely didn't. I did not feel like a girl growing up. I knew I wanted to be a girl. I desperately wanted to be a girl, and I was mad that I wasn't a girl. But I didn't see myself as a girl. I just saw myself as a boy, and I thought that was gross. And so, yeah, I don't think I ever truly was a boy because I was kind of lying to myself in this whole thing. So I don't see when people say you used to be a boy or you used to be a man or something. It's not really. I was always a trans woman. It was just a matter of figuring that out. It's you wouldn't say before someone comes out as gay, you wouldn't say, oh, back when you were straight.
Right.
They were always gay. It was just a matter of finding that out.
Let's also get into that a little bit. So for people who may not understand kind of the difference in, or I guess the separation being transgender and it's not related to sexuality. I think that confuses a lot of people. So can you kind of get into that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's very straightforward to me.
I agree.
If your gender identity and your sexuality are not related.
Right.
I dated girls before transition. I still date girls. I have a wonderful girlfriend, and I I don't know,
totally
seems very
separate.
easy. Yeah. I mean, for some trans people, they do discover new depths to their sexuality through transition. Yeah, and some people's sexuality changes on throughout that, but they're not necessarily related.
Okay, and then one more thing I kind of want to touch on before we sort of wrap up. Before we started filming, you were talking about the loss of male privilege and how that's sort of something that's contentious in the trans community as well as for feminists.
Well, not so much the trans community, but I think there's a lot of feminists, like most obviously what we call trans exclusionary radical feminists, which are feminists who don't see trans women as women and who don't think that trans women have a place within feminism. But I also think there's veins of feminism outside of the exclusionary branches of feminism that also kind of see trans women as still benefiting somewhat from male privilege. I think
what's the argument there?
From my understanding, the argument is one being brought up, seen as a boy or man, you get certain privileges that way. Some some feminists will say that trans women who don't pass, who a lot of people still see as a man, still benefit from male privilege in many ways, which is very arguably wrong because usually they still present somewhat feminine, and still femininity is a lot of what's targeted by misogyny. It's not necessarily bodies or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's another argument. I don't know. There's a bunch of arguments.
So let's just clarify too here for anybody that doesn't understand, that is not a core value for all feminists at all.
No, definitely not.
Feminism is just about equality. It has nothing to do with exclusionary, and then I think some people within that sort of realm may have different sects where they have different opinions about this, but I don't think that's not a core value of feminism.
Definitely not. That. And I think most mainstream feminism, and that might be an overstatement, agree that trans women have a place in feminism.
Yeah.
The nuances of that argument, the nuances of that argument probably go beyond what we can talk about here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the gist of it.
So kind of circling back, bringing this full circle and getting back to your hashtag DoIHaveBoobsNow, which is about the sort of nipple censorship and its inclusion of trans women. Do you consider that a feminist movement?
Definitely, yeah. I think what seems to confuse a lot of journalists who've been writing about this is they're like, yeah, so like this is about trans rights, and it's like, no, it's not. I deliberately did not talk about how I'm affected as a trans person, except for slightly in the original article. I talked about how I'm treated as a woman and how that's changed as I'm seen as more feminine. So yeah, it's about feminism. It's about misogyny. It's about sexism. It's not about transphobia or trans misogyny. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are like, oh, since I am trans, I must be fighting for trans rights. But no, this is a women's issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it definitely is a women's issue. And how do you sort of see that advancing as you kind of continue on this journey?
I mean, we're going to be continuing with the article series, and we're still going to be talking about people who've done similar projects and other people who joined in this. I mean, the project in terms of actually posting pictures is done. Like Facebook and Instagram have censored everything, so there's really no point in continuing on with that. But we're still going to have those conversations. We're still going to talk about, how silly it is that it's nothing about bodies. It's just me identifying as a woman that makes my body worth sexualizing. And also how, though they're claiming to respect my gender by saying, oh, she's a woman, so therefore her topless photos are censored, they don't do the same for trans men who still have breasts. I know many, many trans men who have posted topless photos who their photos get censored.
That is so interesting. That is so interesting. So it's basically like if you're a woman or if you have any semblance of breasts.
Yeah. Femininity is something that's targeted and also something that's, I don't even know what the right word is. we highlight certain things as being feminine, or society highlights certain things as being feminine, and those things, regardless of whether you identify as a woman or not, are still going to be seen as feminine, and breasts are one of those things. And I think that's very problematic for a lot of transmasculine people, especially like, I don't know what the event was, but Buck Angel posted on his Facebook, there was a photo of a bunch of trans men doing a bodybuilding competition. I'm not sure if it was bodybuilding competition or it was just a bunch of buff, good-looking trans men standing and flexing on a stage in Speedos.
I saw the picture on your Facebook.
Yeah.
I stalked your Facebook a little bit. Awkward.
Yeah, and those photos initially got censored by Facebook because some of those trans men still had breasts. A lot of them had mastectomy scars and stuff like that, which Facebook and Instagram have said are okay.
That boggles my mind.
Yeah, but they censored it initially. I think they made an okay later on, but I know tons of trans dudes who, on Instagram especially, Instagram seems to be like really trigger happy with the censorship.
Right.
Even with the stuff with the hashtag curves they censored. I'm not sure if you heard about that.
No.
Yeah, they just were censoring anything that was put with the hashtag curves because they said it was being used for over-sexualization, but like so many things are being sexualized on Instagram. Why did they specify that one? Also, like, yeah, there's tons of things.
So if I put like a picture of a windy road and I was like hashtag curves, they would censor it?
I think they went back and they changed that, but they did for like 2 days. They censored everything with the hashtag curves. They also, yeah, the Pink Ink Fund is a fund for women who have had mastectomies due to breast cancer or whatever else, and as part of the surgeries no longer have nipples, to get either nipple tattoos or some sort of decorative tattoo in place of. And their account got completely deleted by Instagram for a while. I think, again, because of the media outrage, they got it reinstated.
Yeah.
But there's tons of things where, yeah, they are just going trigger wild over completely non-sexual things. And yeah, going back to the photos we did, we intentionally tried to make those photos, we tried to make them not sexual. We tried to just do like beauty shots essentially, yeah. And still they go out of their way to censor these things and sexualize them.
So how would you see this over-sexualization being, especially on social media, being solved? Like, what's the solution here?
Well, I think the important thing to note is that the problem isn't necessarily the censorship on social media. The problem is this sexualization overall in society over women's breasts and women's bodies. And I think not only does the censorship on social media support that overall sexualization, it also exists because of it. So it's a little bit of a loop. So I think, obviously, if Facebook and Instagram stopped censoring, that would be great, and it would contribute to the desexualization of women's bodies. But the main fight is to be fought everywhere in society to recognize that just because a woman is bearing her body doesn't mean that her body is in that state sexual.
Right, it's not an object.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the important thing is when censorship occurs, sexualization is being put onto somebody without their consent. And that's very problematic.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really great point to end on. Thank you so much, Courtney. Can you tell everybody where they can find you and how they can sort of contribute to the cause?
Yeah, if anybody is still wanting to contribute to the DoIHaveBoobsNow and Free All Bodies hashtags, please do. You can find me on Twitter at Courtney Demone and Instagram at the same handle. Facebook, Courtney Demone, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Obviously, guys, we want to hear your thoughts and questions for Courtney in the comments down below, and we'll see you soon.